Millionaire's shocking challenge: restore this engine, and I'll reveal my entire 100,000 salary. Jake Donovan clenched his jaw as the wind howled through the cracked windows of his father's old workshop, a place that used to hum with the sounds of hammers and laughter. Now, it echoed only with his growing anxiety. The landlord's relentless threats of eviction gnawed at him like the rust that clung to the tools on the wall. With each tick of the clock, it felt like his life was slipping away. Customers had vanished almost entirely, leaving him drowning in bills and debt. He could almost hear his father's voice urging him to keep pushing through the hard times, but every day felt heavier than the last. Just then, the door swung open, a gust of wind swirling in, along with a sharply dressed stranger. Richard Lane, a billionaire wrapped in designer fabrics, casually delivered staggering news. The path to salvation for Jake's business and home lay in an old engine from Richard's childhood. A challenge, a daunting, ridiculous challenge. Fix it in a month, and not only would he save his shop, but Richard would expose his salary to the town. It felt impossible. Do you truly think this is just about the money? Jake's mind raced, torn between the golden opportunity and the fear of failure. Can you do it? Richard pressed, his confidence radiating, causing Jake's heart to flutter with an odd mix of excitement and despair. Could he really restore this engine? With little more than the shadow of his father's legacy beside him, the stakes clawed at him. If he failed, would he be abandoning everything his father stood for? Before he could respond, Richard's eyes glinted with amusement as he quipped, "What's the point of a challenge if you don't feel alive?" But Jake's thoughts were elsewhere. Doubts were pulsating through him as vividly as the sounds of his tools. Memories flooded back, his father's thick hands guiding him in the shop, teaching him not just about mechanics but about faith, patience, honor. Would they be enough now? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake couldn't shake the pit in his stomach as he dove into the restoration process, each day filled with frantic adjustments and sleepless nights. The pressure mounted not just from the ticking clock, but from the noise of envy and disbelief creeping in. Cody, his rival, lurked with an all-consuming jealousy, wickedly waiting for Jake to falter. The workbench was cluttered with forgotten dreams, and yet, in the midst of chaos, Lily's return to town breathed warmth back into his life. As she moved with grace, her encouragement wrapped around him like a protective cloak. Together they shared stolen glances and gentle laughter, whispering echoes of hope amidst a storm of despair. But then one day, while working with frantic urgency, Jake discovered a letter hidden deep within the engine, a letter that felt like a lifeline. His father's dreams spilled out, forging a connection to a future that had crumbled away, propelling Jake into a whirlwind of emotions. Would acknowledging these dreams set him free or tighten the noose of his self-doubt even further? With time slipping through his fingers and Cody's underhanded tactics causing constant distractions, Jake stood at a precipice of chaos. Fear clashed with determination, and with every bolt tightened, every piece put in place, a resounding question echoed in his mind: what did it truly mean to be successful? Would he embrace the values his father instilled in him, or let the weight of his struggles drag him under? With the deadline looming and shadows darkening their work, Jake's mind raced. The stakes were higher than ever, and as he tightened the last bolt, he braced himself for an upheaval that could either shatter him or propel him beyond his wildest dreams. Just as he began to find his rhythm, an unexpected call rang out, throwing him into a whirlwind of uncertainty. Would it pull him from the depths of despair, or would it bury him further in? Jake stared at the phone as it vibrated on the workbench, an uninvited aggressor in the fragile calm he had finally managed to cultivate. Clearing his throat, he hesitated, wrestling internally with the urgency of the moment. The old engine loomed behind him, the challenge felt heavier than the steel it was made from. He picked up the phone, his heart racing as he answered, hoping against hope that it would offer a glimmer of reprieve. "Jake? It's Lily," her voice cut through the tension, melodic yet laced with concern. "I heard about the challenge. I've been thinking maybe I can help." As the words sank in, a flicker of hope ignited within him. Yet, Jake's instinct to maintain control tightened around him like a vice. I can handle it, Lily, he replied, though his voice faltered slightly. But you're on a deadline. You don't have to go through this alone, she pressed, her determination tangible, and he could sense the weight of her gaze even from the other end of the line. He inhaled deeply, pulling in the last remnants of his pride. Maybe he could use the extra set of hands, especially one that understood the intricacies of not just engines but the complexities of life. All right, he relented, his voice a cautious surrender. Just be ready for chaos. When she arrived hours later, her enthusiasm was infectious. Together, they set to work, exchanging stories about past times, reminiscing about their childhood days in this very workshop. Each laugh chipped away at the bricks that self-doubt and despair had built around him. As they tackled the engine piece by piece, her presence became a balm to his frayed nerves, igniting a synergy that had long been dormant. Jake worked with newfound vigor, and through the collaboration, he began to rediscover the joy that had initially drawn him to mechanics. Her sharp insights into the engine's operations often led him to solutions he might have missed. The two became like dancers in a symphony, moving fluidly between tasks, the engine gradually revealing its hidden potential under their combined effort. However, as days turned into a blur of late nights and early mornings, Jake noticed missteps, small distractions, and creeping self-doubt nudging into their routine. Cody was relentless, taunts floated over them like static in the air, sowing seeds of unease just outside the workshop's walls. It pestered Jake, growing louder in the recesses of his mind. Why do you care what he thinks? Lily asked one afternoon as they took a break, wiping the sweat from their brows. He could sense the underlying urgency in her question, her genuine concern demanding truth. Jake wrestled with her gaze, trying to peel away layers of deep-rooted insecurities. It's not just him. It's everything. If I fail my father. I lose everything. His voice cracked, unveiling fears he had shielded even from himself. Jake, she said, her intensity pulling him into focus. Your father wouldn't want you to give up. He believed in you. You're proving his dreams alive through this work. Stand tall in it. Her words cut through the fog that had enveloped him, igniting a flicker of confidence. Decision surged within him, colliding like pistons in overdrive. He remembered not only what was at stake but the possibility that infused every bolt they tightened, an affirmation of legacy that went beyond mere survival. With renewed clarity, he faced the snarling specter of failure head-on. The deadline loomed, the well of discontent swirled around him, but within him stirred a tenacity sharpened by passion and shared vision. Just as they secured the last components of the engine, the phone rang again, Richard's name flashing ominously across the screen. Every instinct warned him to ignore it, but he felt an urge akin to gravity pulling him towards it. This call would determine not just the future of the workshop but the very essence of what he had fought so hard to reclaim. With a mix of apprehension and adrenaline, Jake deliberated. Was he ready to confront whatever awaited him on the other end, or would this be yet another cruel twist in an already twisted story? Jake's pulse quickened, his hand trembling slightly as he poised it over the phone. The intensity of the upcoming conversation loomed larger than any engine he had ever faced. What could Richard possibly want? After the last interaction, any uncertainty felt like vestiges of past burdens cascading back into his mind. The sound of the ringing matched the irregular rhythm of his heartbeat, each echo a reminder of his mounting fears. Steeling his resolve, he answered the call, forcing himself to sound composed. Richard. Jake. Good to hear your voice. Richard's tone was jovial, but Jake's instincts bristled. I assume you've made progress on the engine? Yeah, he replied cautiously, scanning the workshop as if the walls had ears. Lily, engrossed in organizing the scattered tools, sensed the shift and paused, flickering her attention toward him. He threw her a reassuring glance, though the tension within felt electric. Listen, I've been thinking about the upcoming competition, Richard continued, his tone shifting to something dangerously enthusiastic. I want to sweeten the pot for you. You restore that engine within the deadline, and I'll tell you the full story of my salary and other perks, real transparency, you know? Enough to turn heads. Jake's stomach twisted, torn between the tantalizing offer and the man behind it. Richard was notorious for dangling alluring prospects, often with ulterior motives. An additional 100,000? It sounded almost too good to be true, yet with Lily's recent encouragement echoing in his ears, he couldn't dismiss it outright. This could be the push he needed. What's the catch? Jake probed, his voice firm despite the worry gnawing at him. Catch? It's simple, Jake. Just focus on the engine. That thing needs to be flawless, and I want you to dive deep into this project as if your life depends on it. Richard laughed again, a sinister edge creeping into his mirth. Imagine it a triumph, a legacy that even your father would admire. What's holding you back? Each word dripped with provocation, and Jake felt the tightness in his chest rise anew. How had Richard become so adept at leveraging his vulnerabilities? Is this truly what his father had envisioned for him? A race for a fabricated validation in a twisted game? Jake's grip on the phone tightened as he took a breath, summoning the courage he had cultivated alongside Lily, the desolation that had haunted him slowly transforming into a steely resolve. I'll get it done, Richard, he said, his voice now imbued with conviction, cutting through self-doubt as if it were paper. Just don't think you can play me against my past. Richard chuckled, clearly enjoying this exchange. I wouldn't dare, Jake. I'll see you soon. The call ended, leaving Jake in a silence that felt like thick fog. He turned to the engine, a challenge that now felt like a battleground for everything he feared and aspired to be. The specter of doubt had grown larger, gnawing at the edges of his newfound determination. How are you holding up? Lily asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. He has offered me. Jake coughed out the words, choking on the weight of the expectation, money. A lot of money if I restore this engine right. Her brow furrowed, disappointment flickering in her eyes. What are you planning to do? I want to prove myself not just to Richard, but to me. Maybe even for my father, he said slowly, the weight of his admission hanging in the air like a sledgehammer. But is it worth sacrificing myself for a dusty old dream? Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the workshop around them felt charged, infused with a shared energy. In this conversation, there lay an unspoken pact, a reminder they were in this together, confronting the ghosts of expectations and ambition. For you to rise, Jake, you need to define what success truly means to you. Maybe it's not just about the money or the engine, it's about reclaiming your story, she replied softly, the wisdom draping over him like a cloak of comfort. Jake nodded, a fragment of clarity shining through the fog. He could feel the gears of his mind shifting. He needed to excavate his motivations, peel back layers of self-imposed restrictions. With each moment that passed, the ticking clock urged him onward. He wasn't merely restoring an engine, he was reigniting fragments of his identity. And soon, the real confrontation awaited him, pushing him towards a test that would define everything he stood to gain or lose. Lily's eyes sparkled with determination as they returned to their work, the engine patiently waiting for their mastery. They understood that beyond just machinery, they were sculpting futures, intertwined and fighting back against a world that threatened to overshadow their dreams. Jake inhaled deeply as he envisioned the road ahead, full of challenges yet brimming with possibility. The time had come to reclaim his narrative, to not just restore the engine, but his own legacy alongside it. What would it take to confront the truth buried within him, to rally against the ghosts of self-doubt once and for all? Jake stood in front of the engine, the weight of the challenge pressing down on him like an overstuffed trunk. He inhaled the familiar scent of oil and metal, but it now felt different, suffused with the specter of expectation. Inside, a storm of emotions churned, doubt wrestling with determination, fear grappling with ambition. This was more than just a mechanical restoration, it was a resurrection of everything he buried deep within himself. As he ran his fingers over the cold steel, he reflected on Richard's words, which replayed incessantly in his mind. The prospect of a financial windfall loomed large, but it was the notion of legacy that captivated him the most. What would it mean to win, to finally earn respect not just from Richard, but from himself? His father's shadow loomed ominously, and Jake wrestled with whether he was acting upon his father's aspirations or forging his own path. Jake, can you pass me that wrench? Lily's voice disrupted his thoughts. Her calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside him. He glanced up to see her struggling to balance a handful of tools. Her willingness to share the burden buoyed his spirits, grounding him in this moment. He moved toward her, aware that teamwork was just as vital as individual skill. Here you go, he said, handing her the wrench, his gaze lingering on the determination in her eyes. Thanks for sticking with me. I know I'm a bit all over the place. Lily wiped her brow and shrugged. We all have our moments. Just remember why you're doing this. This isn't just for Richard or a paycheck. It's for you. That's the legacy you should be focusing on. Her words resonated within him, triggering a cascade of realizations. This wasn't simply about proving anything to Richard or chasing validation. It was about embracing his identity forged through adversity and skills refined through years of passion. The path ahead required an introspective excavation. He had to unearth the true motivation behind his desire to restore the engine. With newfound clarity, he recognized that this project could redefine him, but it hinged on his authenticity. As they worked, he applied himself with a renewed intensity. Each bolt he tightened and every part he polished felt like a step toward reclaiming his narrative. His hands moved deftly, the engine transforming under his skilled touch, but internally, Jake was confronting more than just mechanical issues. He was delving into his own psyche. What did success truly mean for him? Was it wealth, legacy, or overcoming the fears that once shackled him? Lily caught his gaze again, this time with an intensity that startled him. You look deep in thought. What else is it? You can share, you know? It struck him then, vulnerability could be a strength. I just want to make something my father would be proud of. But does that make it his dream, or mine? The doubt crept through his mind like a shadow, but he was determined not to let it consume him. Why not make it both? She replied, her conviction unwavering. You can celebrate his influence while also being true to yourself. It's not an either-or situation. Jake took a moment to absorb her words. You're right. I can honor his legacy while paving my own way. The revelation lit a fire within him. Let us get this engine ready. It will be flawless, not for Richard's approval, but as a testament to what I can achieve. They both re-engaged with renewed vigor, their movements synchronized as the workshop turned into a realm of creativity and resilience. Every spark of the welding torch and every turn of the screwdriver echoed their commitment to craftsmanship and personal growth. The hours melted away, but so did the self-doubt that had plagued Jake. With each completed task, he felt lighter, the burdens of expectation slowly dissipating. This project represented not just an engineering challenge, but a battle against the limitations he had imposed on himself. But lurking at the edges of his newfound confidence was Richard's looming presence, ready to prod and poke at his vulnerabilities for sport. The competition was fast approaching, and as he signed off on a particularly satisfying adjustment to the engine, a new thought emerged. Sharp as the tools around him, the real challenge would be confronting Richard, not just as an adversary but as a reflection of his own insecurities. The question clung to him as they stepped back to admire their work, an engine transformed. What would he say when the moment of truth arrived? Jake stepped away from the engine, the polished metal gleaming with promise. As he examined their handiwork, he couldn't help but marvel at the transformation they had achieved together. Triumph coursed through him like adrenaline, yet nestled within that feeling was an unsettling flutter of anxiety that made him restless. He turned his gaze toward Lily, who was now engrossed in checking the engine systems with a keen eye. Her focus reminded him of his own mission, not merely to recreate his father's glory but to forge a new tenet of his own identity. Each bolt they tightened was more than a mechanical adjustment, it was a declaration of who he was becoming. There was a weight to the progression, a tangible fever that inspired him, yet the clock was ticking, and the competition loomed ever closer. Can you imagine what Richard will say when he sees it? Jake asked, stuffing his hands deep into the pockets of his work pants. His voice carried a hint of trepidation. Richard had always regarded him with a mix of skepticism and disdain. Lily barely glanced up, her tools clicking quietly as she worked. Who cares what Richard thinks? A win is a win. But that engine is your victory against your own limitations. That's what matters. Her words ignited a response within him, provoking thoughts of self-worth complicated by his relationship with Richard. It struck him then that Richard was not only his competitor but a mirror reflecting past insecurities. Each mocking eyebrow raised, every dismissive comment echoed back at him like specters of his failures. Yet here he was, transforming not just an engine but himself. As the shadows in the garage deepened, Jake sensed an urgency bearing down on him. It wasn't just about how Richard would perceive his work, it was an internal push toward mastery. He had to confront the self-imposed restraints that once held him captive. Even now, with the engine nearing completion, he still felt the residual tug of expectation threatening to derail his progress. "What are you thinking about?" Lily's gentle question broke his chain of thought, and he met her gaze, a determined spark ignited between them. Would he dare voice his deeper struggles? Would revealing his doubts diminish the self-growth he was grappling to achieve? "I guess," he hesitated, a vulnerability washing over him. "I just feel like I'm always living in the shadow of past expectations. Even after this, I worry I won't measure up, or worse, that I'm just fulfilling someone else's legacy rather than creating my own." Lily straightened, deliberating her response. "Every artist grapples with their influences, Jake. But you have to decide which parts are yours to keep and which need to be discarded. This project? It's the perfect canvas for that." He inhaled sharply, realization dawning on him. Each completed section of the engine brought him closer to acknowledging both his heritage and his aspirations. His father's legacy would serve not as a shackle but as a blueprint. The thought loop surged in his mind like a mechanical rhythm. He needed to etch his own story into every part he restored. As they worked through the evening, practicality morphed with philosophy. The hum of tools became an undercurrent to their exchange, and each task unwound a piece of Jake's intricate internal narrative. The way he adjusted policy amid the metal and the grease felt less like a burden and more like a dialogue between two parts of himself, the one molded by his father and the one finally stepping into the light. Suddenly, the echo of Richard's voice cutting through the background loomed large, and the weight of inevitability settled back on his shoulders. How would he respond when faced with the confrontation he knew was coming? When Richard would undoubtedly compare their performances, taunting him for his former shortcomings, Jake's resolve hardened. It was coming, he knew it. The moment of truth, a collision of past failures and future aspirations, was not far away. "Lily," he called out, urgency lacing his voice. "Let us finish this. We're almost there, and I won't let doubt take the reins ever again." Little did he know that this affirmation was merely the prelude. Ahead lay a challenge that would test not only his craftsmanship but the very essence of his identity. As they zipped up the last panel, anticipation crackled in the air, a premonition of change, a whisper of revelation. What awaited Jake from Richard and within himself would demand more than just skill. It would require him to finally confront the echo of all his missed opportunities that had haunted him for so long. As the final bolt clicked into place, Jake stepped back, the gleaming engine a testament to the hours he poured into it. Pride surged within him, but it was rivaled by a disquieting apprehension. Richard's impending visit loomed large, casting a shadow over the triumph of their achievements. Could he really showcase his work without falling under Richard's scrutinizing gaze, or worse, his derision? Lily's laughter broke his reverie, and he turned to see her grinning at him, momentarily breaking the thick tension that had settled in the air. "You look like you just solved an equation. Relax. We did great work here." Jake exhaled, her confidence a buoy against the tide of anxiety threatening to pull him back down. "I guess it just feels surreal. I've been chasing this moment for so long. I want to prove something, not just to Richard, but to myself." Lily stepped closer, her expression softening. "Then remember, it's not about him. It's about you. It's time to own your journey." Her words shot through him, igniting a flicker of resolve. He had spent too long tethered to the expectations of others. This was not merely a restoration of an engine, it was a reclamation of parts of himself he had long neglected. "Okay," he nodded, a crease of determination forming on his brow. "I won't let him define how I see myself anymore." The following days saw Jake immersed in preparation, his routine a mix of endless refinements and introspective assessments. Each hour spent polishing the engine was accompanied by mental rehearsals, envisioning how he would confront Richard, anticipating any biting remarks. He practiced responses in front of the mirror, grappling with the urge to retaliate against Richard's taunts while silently battling the doubt festering within him. With each rehearsed line, Jake grew more aware that this was not solely about facing Richard. It was his confrontation with imposter syndrome, a relentless dialogue that had tricked him into believing he was unworthy of success. One evening, while tweaking the engine's final adjustments alone in the garage, the tension coiled tightly within him. He pulled out a worn notebook filled with sketches and designs from his childhood, images that told a story of dreams and pursuits untainted by doubt. Flipping through the pages, Jake reflected on his youthful confidence. Each stroke of the pencil was more than just art, it was desire unfettered by the fears that had crept in over the years. In that moment, clarity hit him. It was not merely enough to be skilled, he had to embody the self-assuredness that defined those pages of untouched ambition. As if the universe sensed his resolve, the door swung open, revealing Richard leaning against the frame, arms crossed and a smirk etched across his face. Well, if it isn't the engine whisperer. Didn't he think you had it in you, Jake? The comment was laced with thinly veiled mockery. Tension surged between them, thick and electric. All the rehearsals, all the internal dialogue led to this moment where he needed to decide. Would he shrink back, allowing Richard's words to penetrate his mind, or would he push back against the tide? Actually, Jake began, the weight of his own reflection giving him the courage he hadn't yet known he possessed. I've got something to show you. Richard's amusement flickered and died slightly, curiosity taking its place. The atmosphere shifted, an unspoken challenge hanging heavily between them, shifting the stakes from mere competition to a duel of wills. Jake took a confident step toward the gleaming engine, prepared to unveil a destiny all his own. What consequences would come of this confrontation? Would he emerge victorious, or would Richard's scorn pull him back into the depths of insecurity he fought so hard to escape? The question loomed larger than ever as they faced each other, a collision course of past expectations and future aspirations igniting into a moment filled with potential. Jake stood before Richard, the weight of their shared history pressing down on him like a thick fog. The engine behind him gleamed with a polish that mirrored his growing determination. He could feel the heat of Richard's gaze, an intense scrutiny that felt both familiar and foreign. Richard had always been the more dominant figure, the instigator of doubt in Jake's mind. But now, he sensed something shifting within himself, a potency that begged to be unleashed. Let us see what you've got, then, Richard quipped, the smirk beginning to curl at the edges of his mouth. There was a challenge embedded in his tone, one that demanded more than just a presentation, but a performance. For an instant, Jake's heart raced. Was he ready for this? Could he truly engage in this duel without being swept away by the familiar currents of insecurity? The cherished memories of scribbled designs from his childhood whispered to him, urging him forward. They beckoned him to embrace the truth of who he had always been, a creator, a dreamer, a flame with ideas. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, opening the hood that shielded the masterpiece he had crafted. This isn't just an engine, it's a rebuilt legacy. Richard moved closer, his arms now uncrossed, the amusement fading from his face as he inspected the work with keen interest. Jake's hands moved deftly, explaining every facet, every part that had been meticulously restored, each modification a declaration of his perseverance. This was no longer a mere showcase for Richard. It was Jake crafting his own narrative, reclaiming every bit of confidence he had lost in moments overshadowed by Richard's bravado. As he spoke, something clicked inside of him. Richard's probing questions tried to dig into doubts, but Jake parried them with newfound assurance. You see, I didn't just focus on aesthetics or performance, I restored its very soul. The words reverberated through the garage, and with each passing moment, Jake felt taller, more grounded. The vestiges of fear fought back, but he countered them with every fact and detail he recounted about the restoration process. He wasn't just presenting, he was asserting his identity. Suddenly, Richard's expression shifted from skepticism to a grudging respect, the corners of his mouth twitching in what might have been the beginnings of an apology. Jake seized the opportunity. You know, this engine is a reflection of me, of resilience, grit, and creativity, things I believe you undervalue. Richard shifted again, the moment quieting. Jake could sense that he had struck a chord deep within. This meant something far beyond the mechanics of an engine, it was personal. He was confronting not just Richard, but every voice that had ever told him he was not enough. His defiance rippled through him, like electricity coursing through the grooves of that polished metal. The silence grew heavy, each second stretching longer as Richard scrutinized him, weighing his words. You might have something here, Richard finally acknowledged, his tone mixed with reluctance and intrigue. But let me see it in action. Prove it not just in theory. A flicker of doubt awakened in Jake anew, as if Richard's challenge held a power to unravel his resolve. How could he prove such a claim? A feat of engineering alone wouldn't satisfy Richard's elusive standards. What do you want from me? Jake shot back, the question born of authentic frustration as retreat loomed in the periphery of his mind. "Fix it, and I'll reveal the extent of what I can offer," Richard replied, his voice teetering between challenge and a twisted form of mentorship. Jake's breath hitched. What did Richard mean by offer? What lay beyond the challenge he had just laid out? The implications rattled him, awakening both curiosity and dread. The stakes had just escalated drastically, interwoven with potential advantages and hidden agendas. This escalatory moment hung in the air, charged with the tension of the unknown. It was a tipping point, a pivotal moment suspended between fear and possibility. Would he accept Richard's challenge, stepping further into a world rife with risks and opportunities? As he stared decisively at Richard, shaking off any final remnants of doubt, the question crystallized in his mind. The time had come to face his own limitations, not just in engineering, but in confronting the very forces that had held him back for so long. He was ready, but would he falter? The silence seeped into their exchange, a pause for breath before a deeper dive into the chaos that lay ahead. What would he uncover about himself in the unraveling of this challenge? What awaited him in the shadows of Richard's proposition? The challenge hung in the air, a palpable tension that thrummed between them. Jake's heart raced as he weighed Richard's proposition. The prospect of unraveling not just the mechanical intricacies of the engine but also the layers of uncertainty within himself felt monumental. Fix it. What did that truly entail? Was it simply about restoring the physical components, or was it something deeper, more transformative? He gazed at the engine, considering the layers of its design, mirroring the layers of his own life that felt frayed and underdeveloped. Each meticulous restoration he had completed on this machine paralleled the invisible scars he had worked to mend within himself. Would he really have to dive into this deeper challenge, repairing more than just metal and machinery but also the core of his identity? Fix it, he echoed, the words bouncing back at him like an echo in an empty room. What do you think I am, some sort of miracle worker? He barely recognized the confrontation seeping into his tone, but the rawness of his emotions was undeniable. For once, Jake saw a shadow of vulnerability cross Richard's otherwise smug demeanor. You've shown creative spirit, Jake. But can you think beyond the obvious? Can you dig deep into your intuition? Richard's words pricked at Jake's insecurities. Wasn't this the pattern he had always been trapped in, letting others dictate the terms of his worth? This wasn't just about the engine, this was about taking ownership. I'm capable of more than you know, Jake shot back. The conviction in his voice surprised even him. With newfound determination, he turned to the engine, visualizing the test ahead. He would dismantle it once again, not just as an act of physical restoration but as an introspective journey. Every bolt removed would signify a shedding of his ego, every part reattached a reclamation of his self-esteem. Could he dismantle the chaos that Richard represented in his mind? Jake reached for his tools, the familiar grip feeling reassuring against his palms. As he began to work, he pictured his dreams, the aspirations he had long tucked away, artistic expressions that lived behind layers of self-doubt. The whir of the tools became rhythmic, grounding him while pacing his thoughts. After all, every great engineer knew that to improve something, you had to understand its flaws intimately, immerse yourself in its complexities, and then lovingly restore it to its original intent. Time slipped by unmarked. Before he knew it, he had several parts removed, revealing the intricate workings of the engine and nervous system of gears, pulleys, and rivets. In that moment, he realized his desire to not only fix the engine but also elevate his own purpose in that space. The clarity blurred between him and the machine as he visualized pulling both into alignment, but Richard's unwavering scrutiny wasn't far behind. You've got the hands, Jake. Now it's about your mind. Can you really innovate? Or will you simply recycle the past? The challenge reverberated off the walls. Each word landed with weight. In that moment, Jake felt the stir of confrontation within him, not just toward Richard, but within the context of his aspirations. Could he push through his limitations? What did true innovation look like? The whisper of creativity nudged at him. He thought about switching the engine's traditional setup, embracing an unconventional twist that could transform the performance overall. What many considered standard, he could reinvent. As he shifted his focus, the flicker of possibility ignited this moment was not merely about earning Richard's approval, but about fostering his own identity as an innovator. With a sense of urgency, Jake began sketching ideas in small notepad nearby, a flood of ingenuity flowing as his thoughts turned into tangible concepts. Aligning the engine to something extraordinary was now more than a challenge, it felt like a declaration of his own evolution. But would he have the courage to execute these ideas? The path was littered with the fear of failure, the specter of public criticism looming large. Could he transform that fear into fuel? The question sat heavily with him, eluding easy answers. As he meticulously recorded every notion, Jake realized he was standing on the precipice of discovery, both of a new engine design and a renewed sense of self. Yet, with every tick of the clock, the reality of Richard's expectations loomed larger. What awaited Jake as he plunged deeper into this dual challenge of innovation and self-worth? Could he rise above the fear and truly unveil his potential, or would doubt bring him to his knees? The stakes were higher than ever, and the weight of his decision started to settle in. The next phase loomed ahead, an uncharted territory that Jake was both eager and terrified to explore. Would he accept the risk and possibility that new ideas could bring? Or would he retreat back to the safety of the familiar? Jake's heart thudded heavily in his chest as he weighed the magnitude of his decision. Skimming his notepad, the sketches of an unconventional engine design sprawled out like a chaotic map leading him through unfamiliar territory. He had dared to abandon the typical blueprints and embrace ideas that felt both electric and terrifying. Confidence and doubt wrestled for dominance within him as Richard's challenge echoed back a call to push the boundaries of what he thought possible. With each sketchline he drew, Jake felt the essence of innovation surging inside him. It was more than just re-engineering components, it was reconstructing the very fabric of his self-belief. Could he truly redefine the way the engine operated? As he continued to flesh out his ideas, a vision began to take shape. The engine wasn't merely a machine but a symbol of his ambition. It had the potential to disrupt expectations, much like his own life needed to. Yet Richard's figure loomed, scrutinizing with predatory interest. Every twinge of uncertainty that Jake felt heightened Richard's presence. The pressure settled upon Jake's shoulders like an unbearable weight. Would his efforts with the engine align with a deeper productivity that could reframe his narrative, or would he merely exist as a spectator in his own life, forever fearing to take the leap? He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow and focused back on the task at hand. This wasn't merely about what would impress Richard or validate him, it was about awakening the vision that had long laid dormant in his mind. The tentative flicker of creativity he sensed earlier grew into a blaze, demanding action. He had to confront not merely the fear of failure but the very identity he had allowed to be stifled under the weight of others' expectations. The engine components sprawled before him, and in that moment, Jake realized every obstacle they presented mirrored his own life hurdles. Ignoring distractions, he let determination bathe him in clarity. If he could innovate here, he would set a precedent for himself, one that surged beyond the confines imposed by Richard or his past insecurities. Jake began to break down every part with purpose, seeking efficiencies and changes that would allow the engine to function more smoothly. What if he utilized lighter materials? Or integrated a new type of fuel system? His hands worked almost autonomously, dismantling pieces with precise movements while his mind raced with plans. He was no longer just attempting to impress, he was laying the groundwork for a narrative of resilience and tenacity. But what of Richard? Would he even recognize the ingenuity behind the work? The looming question lingered. What if it wasn't just about the engine? What if Richard's approval or disapproval fed into Jake's deeper need for validation? This uncertainty began to gnaw at him again. Yet, he confronted it head-on. The engine could not be a mere tool for acceptance but an embodiment of his burgeoning evolution. Hours turned into a whirlpool of creativity and grit. The engine gradually morphed into something uniquely Jake, both an aesthetic and a mechanical wonder. In each adjustment, he felt a slight shift in his perception, a growing sense of self-worth. But as he stepped back, wiping the grease from his hands, Richard's expectations loomed larger. "Can you execute this vision?" echoed in Jake's mind. The challenge was no longer simply about the engine, it served as a reflection of his inner turmoil. Would he risk everything to showcase not just a mechanical masterpiece but a testament to personal transformation? Jake's breath caught in his throat. What if his work wouldn't translate into a grand reveal? Would the world accept his reinvention? With each heartbeat hammering against his resolve, he knew he stood at the fringes of his ability, the edge of a self-discovery journey that could redefine his professional destiny. He stood poised between fear and courage, the stakes rising higher than ever. Would he take that final leap into untested waters, or would he fall back into the confines of doubt? Ahead lay the moment of truth, the unveiling of not just the engine, but the newfound strength within himself. Would he embrace this radical evolution or retreat? The choice loomed, as did the repercussions, shining a spotlight on the pivotal moment he must face next. Jake stood before the newly restored engine, the culmination of weeks filled with challenges, self-doubt, and hard-won triumphs. He took a moment to step back and scrutinize the masterpiece that now gleamed under the workshop lights. The physical transformation mirrored his own, a radical departure from the lost mechanic he had once been. This project had ignited a flame within him, pushing him to depths he never thought he could reach and beckoning him to rise. It was time to face Richard, not just the wealthy businessman, but the embodiment of all Jake's insecurities. The looming confrontation hung heavy in the air, but the weight was no longer suffocating. He had come far enough to understand that Richard's opinion, however influential, did not define his worth. Through the twists and turns of mechanical restoration, he had uncovered a truth that resided deep within: he was capable. He had embraced his father's legacy while crafting his own narrative, one equipped with validation rooted in personal experience. Taking a deep breath, Jake approached Richard, who leaned against the workbench, an inscrutable expression clouding his features. "Well, Jake, let us see if you've finally stepped up to the plate." The challenge sat thick between them, yet Jake felt a steady resolve. He could engage Richard on his own terms. "This isn't just a repair job, it's a testament to who I am," Jake declared without hesitation, feeling a swell of confidence infuse his words. The silence that fell between them quickly turned taut with Richard's scrutiny. "Show me what you've got," Richard said, motioning with a flick of his wrist. With each step toward the engine, Jake felt the combined pressure of their gazes. The reflection of pride, anticipation, and excitement pushed him forward. As Jake meticulously detailed the innovations he had made, highlighting the design alterations and performance enhancements, he was immediately aware of a shift. Richard listened intently, a glimmer of intrigue breaking through his previously smug demeanor. "This could turn some heads, Jake," Richard admitted, his tone uncharacteristically unguarded. For the first time, Jake could see respect there, the kind he had chased for so long but had mistakenly believed rested solely in Richard's hands. "I didn't just want to fix an engine, I wanted to craft something that tells my story, a blend of legacy and innovation," Jake explained passionately, each word ringing true to his journey. It was no longer a means to an end, it was the embodiment of growth. Richard stepped back, absorbing the details while studying Jake with newfound respect. "When did you learn to think like this?" he asked, his voice softer, almost contemplative. "It's about redefining success for myself," Jake replied, a wave of pride rushing through him. "Success isn't merely about money or accolades, it's about resilience, authenticity, and embracing the challenge ahead." The moment hung in the air, filled with the connection forged through vulnerability and triumph. Richard's expression shifted as if he were grappling with his own perceptions. "I underestimated you," Richard nodded slowly, extending a hand for a shake, "and I've been wrong about many things." Jake felt a swell of fulfillment. This wasn't just acceptance, it was the moment he had craved, the moment that defined his growth from seeking approval to asserting his own value. He grasped Richard's hand firmly, acknowledging that this transformation was profound, not only for him but also for the man who had mirrored his self-doubt for so long. As they released each other, Jake realized that he had accomplished what once seemed unattainable. He had restored the engine and rebuilt his own self-image, reclaiming both his father's legacy and his own identity in one fell swoop. Confidence settled within him like a sturdy foundation, solid and unwavering. This was where he belonged, the workshop humming with the echoes of laughter, defiance, and renewed purpose. With each passing moment, Jake recognized that success wasn't defined by external acknowledgement, it thrived within the satisfaction of realizing his potential. He had faced down Richard and his demons, conquered the personal battles that once threatened to overshadow his dreams, and emerged with clarity. As he prepared to leave the workshop, Jake turned for one last look, pride swelling in his chest. It was more than an engine, it was a bridge to a future unshackled by fear and doubt. He had proved to himself what it meant to grow, to persevere, and to transform. The engine had roared back to life, and so had he now. If you're inspired by Jake's journey and want to witness more exclusive emotional stories of personal overcoming, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support by leaving a like to help the algorithm reach those who need to hear these affirming messages. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness such a transformative conclusion. Your engagement is vital. Comment below with your thoughts and theories about the ending.